All right, ladies and gentlemen, now that Dr. Geza is already on stage, let us roll on to the next industrial forum on agricultural forestry, greening the land, sustainable practices in agriculture and forestry. And this segment is brought to you by Sarah Carbon. May I please have the pleasure to invite Mr. Supun Nigamuni, Managing Director of Control Union Malaysia, to chair this session. And we will also have our panelists for this segment. Apart from Dr. Geza, we have Mr. Koo Kok Peng, Chief Sustainability Officer of Kuala Lumpur, Kapong Berhad, Mr. Lawrence Chia, Chief Executive Officer of Sarah Carbon, Sidrian Berhad, and Mr. Rashid Reza Anwaruddin, Chief Sustainability Officer of SD Guthrie. Now, without further ado, I'll hand the floor over to Mr. Supun.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Thank you very much, everyone. And it's an honor to be in front of an esteemed panel covering both forestry and palm oil, as well as actually tech. You know, forestry and palm oil industries are crucial for the Malaysian economy. It basically not just earn revenue, but it basically provides livelihood and enormous amount of support for the Malaysian economy. And this is a sector which has actually been under scrutiny, whether it's actually deforestation, whether it's actually social compliance, whether it's land grabbing, and so on and so on. So this is a sector that it's actually always evolving, and the challenges never stops. So challenges actually keeps coming, and I'm very honored to actually be with four very important people who is actually influencers, who's driving change in the industry and tackling these matters on a day-to-day basis. So let's get into the panel when we talk about greening the land and looking into the sustainability of oil palm and the forestry sector. Yeah, the flow of this panel discussion would be that each of the speakers will actually have 5 to 7 minutes to quickly pitch and share the impact that they have actually created in their day-to-day operations, and what are the significant challenges that they have actually seen and how they have actually overcome. And then we will actually go on to a very engaging question and answer session where we will actually go through questions coming your way. So scan the QR code, send in the questions to us. We'll be more than happy to pick it up. And let me introduce our esteemed panelists to you, starting with the closest. Koo Kok Peng, the Chief Sustainability Officer of Kuala Lumpur Kampung Berhad. Koo actually leads the sustainability strategy, risk management, communications, investor relations, corporate responsibility, and government relations for the group. It's a long list, Koo. And he's also, in addition to being a key member in the KLK, is also an influencer in the field, where he's also sitting as a governor for the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil, as well as an alternative council member for the Malaysian Palm Oil Association, MPOA. And the next, we have Mr. Rashid Reza Anwaruddin, the Chief Sustainability Officer of SD Guthrie, leading the entire sustainability initiatives for SD Guthrie and global operations and engaging with stakeholders in sustainable palm oil. We heard about SD Guthrie, but Rashid is actually here to actually share more in-depth on how SD Guthrie is actually engaging on sustainability. With over 22 years of experience, I think we with Koo and Rashid in place, I believe we cover the entire palm oil contingent. So we are honored to have you. So forestry is not an area that we would neglect for sure. And we have one of the most important figures in the forestry industry of Malaysia, Mr. Lawrence Chia, the CEO of Sarah Carbon, as well as Samling Group, which is one of the largest players in the timber industry in Malaysia, and not just for timber, but also for businesses including automobiles, properties, timber, infrastructure, palm oil, and serves employees, more than 15,000 employees across Malaysia and overall. And we all know Geza. Thank you very much for that session. Geza is the CEO of a carbon space, specializing, as we saw, the climate change policies and DMRV technologies, with over 15 years of leadership at various large commodity traders, and contributed enormously to RSPO, PYG, UNDP, ISPO, and MPOC, promoting impactful sustainable practices. So without further ado, let's start kick this session off with palm oil. And Koo, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. So between Rashid and myself, we had a chat prior. So I'm going to cover off the circularity aspect of the sustainability practices in palm oil plantation, and Rashid will cover off the rest of the content. So zooming in on sustainability in the palm oil plantation, particularly on circularity, I think this is a story that's not well told in the sense that the biomass from the estates, none of it are actually wasted. So I have a chart here that basically follows the biomass. So at the point of harvesting, for those of you who are in the estate, you know that you need to take down the fronds before you can harvest the FFB, the fresh fruit bunches. So the fronds are actually stacked in onto the land, perpendicular to the flow of the water, and this helps to retain the moisture. And of course, some of the nutrients from the frond will also go back to the land. And then the fresh fruit bunches, the FFB, is actually sent to the mill, and from there, what will be coming out of it, or rather the waste that's coming out of it, the main part of it is the empty fruit bunches. And for most of large plantation company like ourselves and SD Guthrie, we will return the empty fruit bunches to the field as a mulching exercise, and it is actually very rich in potassium. So for the palm industry, and then actually for most agricultural produce, you need nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and the empty fruit bunches is a very rich source of potassium nutrient. Now, from the mills, we would also get palm kernel shell once you crack the shell to extract the palm kernel. And these shell are primarily used to fire our boilers. So in the mills, we would need a combination of heat and sometimes power. So the palm kernel shell is actually used to power up the boiler, and the heat is then used for the sterilization purposes of the fresh fruit bunch. And then we will also have some fibers. We have the short fibers, what we call the mesocarp fiber. Similarly, the mesocarp fiber can also be used as fuel for the boilers as well. Now, we would also have palm oil meal effluents, and this is the one that is a little bit more difficult to manage because it emits methane. And as we know, methane is a 25 times factor of carbon emission. So in most cases, we will trap the methane and use it to generate power. And these power can either be used for self-consumption, or it can be sent to the grid if the grid is in need of the power and is able to take the power. So this is a conversion of the biogas to electricity. I think a further iteration of this could possibly be, in fact, not possibly be, it has already been done, where you scrub the biogas and produce biomethane, because biogas contains 55 to 65% of methane, and that is a very good fuel as a substitute for liquefied natural gas in our system as well. So I've covered all the waste. I think the only waste that's not covered in this chart is what do you do with the trunks when you take them down as you replant. So in our case, we do what we call chip and pulverize process, whereby at the point when the trunk is felled, we will chip them in order for them to be able to decompose faster. And 3.5 months later, we'll do a pulverization process. So this again returns the nutrient back to the soil. I just want to give 2 examples of what we do in our operations. We have filter belt presses.
Somebody's phone is ringing.
It's in one of the bags, yeah. Yeah, okay, I'll just continue. So we have this filter belt presses, which is basically what we do is we dredge the solid from the palm oil meal effluent, and then the solids is actually returned to the field as well as what you call a biofertilizer. And on your right, what you will see is the biogas power plant. We have 9 at the moment. We have plans to install and a further 12. Which will mean that by 2030, 2/3 of our meals will be covered by either biogas or some form of methane methane avoidance mechanism. So that's my part of it. I will hand the time now to Rashid.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks, Ku, and thanks, Supun. I get the clicker. So thanks the organizers for inviting us as the Gatri to share a bit about what we're doing around sustainability. If I can get my slides, okay. Just before I start, maybe I just wanted to give a bit of comment, Supun, that this panel, we're not doing that well when it comes to gender diversity. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely right. So that's something that we should improve.
Yeah. So essentially, when we talk about sustainability for SD Gatri holistically, we tend to look at it from three different pillars, right? Zero, restore, and transform. Zero means, how do we minimize and zeroize our negative impacts? So things like, our net zero commitment around emissions, the work that we're doing around no deforestation in our supply chain, and also the work that, similar to what Ku mentioned just now, the work that we're doing around circularity in our operations as well. And the second pillar, we tend to talk about what we call restore, which is basically the work that we're doing around conservation and biodiversity, reforestation, and also looking at regenerative agriculture practices as well, where how do we sort of maintain fertility of the soil. And the third pillar when it comes to the way that we look at sustainability is transform, is the people side of things. How do we transform lives and livelihoods? So things like, human rights, labor rights, community rights. How do we make lives and livelihoods better for communities and smallholders? And also how do we make work and life better for employees within our operations as well? So essentially that's how we sort of view sustainability as a whole. And just to give some sort of picture, some sort of color on the sort of things that we are doing around these particular areas. So for example, under the zero pillar, I mean, we are the first palm oil company globally to get our net zero targets certified by the Science Based Targets Initiative, and we took a period of 2 years to actually get to that particular level. And what that essentially means is the targets that we set for the immediate, medium and long term are aligned with the sort of expectations in limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. So we have our 2030 targets and 2050 targets. And what that particular exercise also enabled us to do was basically looking at our entire global footprint. So just to give you an idea, we operate across Malaysia, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands when it comes to our upstream operations, more than 600,000 hectares. And the oil that we produce goes all over the world, to Europe, to the US, to Africa, Asia Pacific, Oceania. So what we've identified is three key things, right? So one is eliminating deforestation within our supply chain. Two, like what Ku mentioned just now, capturing the methane from our mills itself. And number three, relooking at the way that we approach land use in minimizing emissions from land use. And if you were to target these three things, essentially we'll be targeting almost 80% of our global emissions. So those are things that we're currently working on. So for example, similar to what Ku mentioned just now, we already have 18 biogas plants up and running now, and the target is by 2030 to have 45 of these methane capture plants in our operations. We also are monitoring our global supply chain to make sure that it is deforestation free. And at this point in time, our mills itself is 99.99% traceable to plantation. So there's another 140 tons out of our 11 million tons of FFB that we source and process, that we basically need to trace and make sure that there's no deforestation from those FFB. So there's a lot of work that's already being done around there. And if you look at the sort of work that we're doing around conservation, so having a more positive impact to nature. So we're looking at areas within our operations that we can protect, areas that that has been degraded that can be restored, and also areas which are adjacent to, for example, highly forested areas that we can also connect to. So a lot of work has already been done around reforestation within our operations and within our value chain as well. So just to give you a rough idea, these are some numbers that we've been working on for the past few years. But globally, we already have now roughly around 46,000 hectares of conservation areas and conservation set-asides within our operations. And then we also have another 13,000 hectares of areas that we protect, which are outside of our concession areas as well. And Again, we work with a lot of stakeholders to do, this sort of projects within our operations and also within the landscapes that we operate. And one key thing, last slide that I wanted to talk about is basically smallholders as well, because this is quite important in the palm oil industry. So globally, the palm oil industry, 40% of the oil that is produced is basically originates from smallholders. So ourselves, globally, we work with more than 40,000, roughly 40 to 50,000 smallholders. So there's a lot of work that's currently being done to basically engage with these smallholders to basically get them to adopt responsible agricultural practices as well. I mean, an example is, in Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands, we've managed to get 17,357 smallholders certified to the RSPO, and also develop segregated supply chains for them in such a way that if we were to get premiums from our customers, they will also get a share of the premiums. So those are just some of the things that I just wanted to highlight, and hopefully I didn't go above time.
Oh, you're on time. Thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for. Okay, good. Yeah, no worries. Thank you very much for both Rashid and Ku for giving their insights into the palm oil sector. One thing that you clearly identified is actually there's no waste anymore for palm oil industry. There's zero waste. Everything is actually monetized. Everything is money. So the challenge has actually been an opportunity, and it's actually thriving the economic gains of the company. So good that the palm oil industry is championing it. We'll get back to the palm oil sector in the question and answers, but before that, we need to move into forestry. Lawrence, appreciate if you share your journey of being one of the largest timber companies in Malaysia and now being a driving force in the carbon industry on the nature-based solutions. Over to you.
Okay. I think that straight to the point is that I think that as you all know that I come from the state of Sarawak, and Sarawak has been quite progressive in terms of pursuing the green economy. You've been reading about it in terms of all the things that we're talking about. Secondly is that, as you all know, that 60% of the forest in Malaysia today sits in Sarawak. So I think it's a responsibility of ours to make sure that we can participate in the climate change journey. Certainly, forestry been also that we're quite a dominant player in the forestry space. We are also working with the government in terms of having a sustainable forest management as part of the green economy and working towards the net zero carbon emissions by 2050 for the state. So part of the whole thing is that today in Sarawak today we have over 1 million hectares of what we call natural forests, and then we have about 300,000 in terms of ITP type forests. Glad to say that we are substantially, most all our forests have been certified under the PEFC. But one of the things that we're also looking at in how to participate in the green economy is to look at forest carbon. So we work together with the Sarawak government in terms of identifying the right opportunity for us to work on it. And I just want to share with you this particular project that we are doing. It's the first nature-based project that we are doing in Sarawak. And hopefully, together with the government, we try to develop a template that is something we can, the rest of Sarawak, we can follow in terms of forest carbon. Forest carbon is a new concept, as you all know. However, the state has have legislated it in 2022. We can see that we have also, the state has come out with also legislation in terms of forest carbon. So we embark on that. So in terms of a lot of things that people talk about is transparency and the integrity and in terms of carbon. So we like to work with a lot of independent parties. We engage with the university for EPIC consultation. We work with a lot of the professionals. Our target is obviously try to bring a lot of the Sarawak-based professionals to work on a lot of this carbon to develop an ecosystem that we have. Sorry, I just quickly on the project here. Sorry. So we identify the areas in called Marudi. This is you can see that we involved in protection of the peatland, afforestation, and also working with the various environmental groups in terms of conservation and also the biodiversity side. In this area, 25,000 is roughly the area of the carbon. Peat swamp wetlands, probably one of the last wetlands, peat forests that we have in Sarawak. This was originally meant for an ITP, so this is where the additionality comes in. So roughly, we are quite advanced already to the stage whereby we are been validated and verified now. So roughly, this is the impact that we have in terms of the carbon emission reduction, roughly about 1.6 million tons per year. So, and then obviously one of the big thing in terms of the project outcome, obviously community co-benefits. As you know, that in all these carbon projects, there are three pillars to it. One is the carbon accounting side, that's quickly to went through. The other one is the community, and the third one is the biodiversity side. So it is challenging, as you can see, when you come to the community side. Obviously, one of the things is about educating them, and in terms of what carbon project is all about. So you can see that we have about 50 villages here, about over 1,000 households, and the key outcome of some of these projects that we're working towards is to provide job opportunities, to elevate the poverty line, and all the other things that we think of doing. So all these things are sort of validated and substantiated by UNIMAS with the University of Sarawak in terms of developing the baseline for us to do community project. So very quickly, some of these things that we do. Some of these professionals, they work, you can see that a lot of them are based in Sarawak. So from the peat side, university side, and the biodiversity side. Like I said, the three pillars that we work on: carbon accounting, community, and biodiversity side. So what drives the community programs that we have is obviously a reference to all the SDG goals that we have identified, and hopefully we're going to pursue a lot of these things that you can see that from elevation of poverty right down to education, gender equality, and all these things, that we are also developing programs to try to address some of these issues that we have. The outcome of this obviously is to improve the living standard of the community in that region. Just for a reference point, today we did a survey there. 63% of the population there is below the national average in terms of the poverty line. So we can see that there's a lot of things we can do to help the community here. So very quickly, we did the UNIMAS thing, and some of the challenges we face here. Obviously land issue is a big thing. I think educating them in terms of understanding what carbon project is another big thing. Alignment between the interests of the various natives that we talk about. So these are some of the issues that we have to deal with. Okay. These are some of the programs that we're doing. Tree planting started some of this program where you can see that there's quite a lot of engagement with the community, constantly educating them and telling them what projects we're doing, how is that going to help them in terms of their livelihood and things like that. So on the biodiversity side, obviously we've been working with university to develop camera traps to see what sort of animals that we can continue to protect and enhance them. So these are some of the animals that we have on the region. One of the things that I want to mention is the bearded pig thing population. Is that that has been sort of, the numbers has been reduced significantly because of of course the degradation of the forest there. So nevertheless, we are embarking on a program on how to preserve some of these animals. One of the things that we're going to be very conscious about is obviously, are we doing the right things? Can we, improve our standards and quality? So we engage B0, which is an independent rating body, to go through all the things we do. You can see that they have given us the highest rating so far as nature-based solution is concerned. I think just want to point out basically the rating, the last one, the rating is posted by low risk to carbon accounting. So basically they felt that we are quite conservative in terms of our carbon accounting side. And, that's why one of the things that they're giving us a high rating is that. I think I'll just end there. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Lawrence, for those insights. And it's very important for everybody to hear the challenges that you are going through, especially when developing nature-based carbon projects in a landscape like Sarawak, which we have so much native customary rights and various other dynamics. And thank you very much for the sharing. Now we start the Q&A session. I would like to basically start off with Geza, who was very patient. We heard from both the palm oil companies as well as also from the forestry companies. And what you bring to the table is actually something very innovative. Something is a game changer, which is actually changing the status quo of how MRV, monitoring, reporting, verification, is actually done through digital MRV. Like any human nature, people are actually reluctant to change, and we have to actually build credibility behind this kind of technologies. And likewise, what are your perspectives on that? What's the journey that you are taking to improve the credibility of the DMRV technologies, and why DMRV technologies compared to the conventional ways of monitoring the carbon emissions as well as sequestrations?
Yeah, thanks, Upun. It is a fundamental question, and if you don't have an answer, you should not do monitoring, reporting, verification. The reason why I left my corporate past and moved to a service provider is because I realized the opportunity in this. Now, a digital MRV solution is as good as the outcome, and any MRV needs to be auditable, verifiable. And this is our strategy since the beginning, that there has to be a peer review attached, a validation and a verification exercise, but not only at the methodology level, but all your standard operating procedures. So we ourselves need to be radically transparent, and the projects need to be radically transparent too. So the market acceptance is important to make digital MRV technology credible, and the data itself need to be transparent, which means you need to go transparent about your accuracy levels, your uncertainty levels, and you need to attach it to every single report. So that's key. I would say that's the basics.
Thank you very much. I would like to move on to the two palm oil giants. To start with Ku, I believe KLK, everybody knows that it's actually a large palm oil company, but some of we know that KLK buys, I think, almost about 80% of crops from third parties. So, and your supply chains, your plantations are basically across, and you pointed out one of the very important topics, that 40% of palm oil contingent is actually smallholders. So especially when it comes to smallholders, and if you take a country like Indonesia, what's the number? 6.4 million hectares is actually smallholders. So how are you dealing as a company which is operating across the globe on the matters like deforestation? What are the measures that you are doing, and especially considering that your third-party supply is enormous and smallholders contribute massively, and how are you making an influence on those smallholders?
So our supply chain is very complicated. So let me just first explain how it works, right? So we have the upstream, which ends up in the mills. At that level, our supply from third party in terms of fresh fruit bunches are not that big. It's probably only in about 10 to 15%. Then we have the midstream, and this is at the refinery and the kernel crushing plant. And that's where we do source a lot from third party mills. And that's when the third party supply starts coming into the process. And then one step below that, we have the oleochemical operation, and the oleochemical will buy also from mills, and so they have the similar challenge as per the refineries and KCP. So what we do is that we have a very clear set of criteria in terms of who we onboard. So when we onboard a supplier, we will look at their TTP data, for example. And then also because of the EUDR that we have been grappling with for the last 1 year, we are also looking for other data like their concession maps, their polygon data, any kind of documentation that also indicates that they have the legal right of use of the land and things like that. So it's actually a very tedious process. It's an entire traceability process. I think Rashid kind of alluded to that with the various, various types of traceability numbers. It's traceability to mills, traceability to plantation, from the refineries, from the mill. They are all very different. But the long and short of it is it's all about traceability. And so a lot of people may misunderstand that if you are certified, then you should not have this problem. But certification is not the same as traceability. Traceability means that you are able to go back to where the source of the supply is coming from. So it's very tedious work to do that, and particularly with smallholders, they may not have the resource or the capacity. And the other challenge with smallholders is smallholders tends to grow through a collection network, which includes small collection centers and then going into dealerships. And when you have a mill that is procuring from dealers, that is potentially where the obstacles are, because the dealers may not be entirely transparent in terms of who their mid-size outgrowers or their smallholders are, right? So I think we are at this point where there is potentially some progress that can be made. The new MSPO 2.0 version is supposed to start tracing it from the dealers onward, but it is also not made mandatory, which complicates the matter, right? But it is a process that I think we have to undergo. And I think with companies that are exposed to EUDR, such as ourselves and SIME, I think we're looking at our supply chain and trying to qualify the supply chain that is verified deforestation free. I think those will be the ones that we will focus on primarily, but over time, I think we will have to take actions in terms of engaging the supplier to inform them, to educate them, and possibly also to capacity build them. And in some extreme cases, maybe there might be the need for us to provide certain resources so that they are able to come into the system. But it's not an easy task.
Thank you very much. I would like to start from where you touched upon UDR, and Rashid ST3 has actually been championing and shipping out the first shipments with UDR compliance ahead of the regulations. Now today morning also we discussed on EUDR because there's a lot of European interest here, and we are in a bit of a dilemma of a possible postponement of the implementation. And how are you looking into it as a company who has already there? Is this good, or is this things that which was not appreciated, or how are you looking into it?
So it's a combination of good and bad, because we basically, when the EUDR was supposed to kickstart at the end of the year, we basically rushed ourselves to make sure that we are ready. And once we are ready, then we found out that it's delayed. So what that means is, it basically gives other sort of competitors like our friend Ku here more time to basically prepare for the regulations itself. However, I mean, the way that we see it is this, right? We have basically developed a segregated supply chain from Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands, which is also smallholder inclusive, including 17,000 smallholders, into Europe, and we have now validated that it's deforestation free. So moving forward, even though it is delayed, all of our shipments to Europe now are EUDR compliant to the best of our knowledge. And what we will be doing now is we are now looking at developing other bespoke supply chains to go to Europe. So we're looking at Malaysia origin oils, which will be EUDR compliant, and also Indonesia origin oils, which may potentially be EUDR compliant. But just touching on the challenges that we have with regards to complying to a regulation like UDR, right? Essentially, the way that we look at it, it's essentially we have to develop two separate supply chains. And two separate supply chains mean, it is basically a physical oil supply chain, but also a data supply chain that needs to go to Europe as well. And the challenge with the data supply chain that goes to Europe is that people who do not have the capability to comply to these basically data requirements are excluded from this particular supply chain. And this is what we are seeing, is that more and more of the discussions that we have with customers is how do we exclude suppliers who may not be deforesting, but do not have the necessary documentation to support their no deforestation claims within the supply chain. And this is particularly important for smallholders as well, because smallholders, they may not be deforesting, but they may not have the necessary documentation, tools, and capability to basically comply with these requirements. And just because of that, in certain cases, we have to exclude smallholders. So the challenge is, how do we then ensure that we can be more inclusive in this particular regulation to also ensure that smallholders have also access to the European markets.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I'd like to move on to Lawrence. You touched upon very important factors. Carbon. Sarawak was actually the first to regulate carbon, to consider this as actually a product. And you have actually been in this journey for the last 5 years to get the project up and running. So, and we hear the challenges that you face and also the general Sarawak contingent, especially on prepare informed consent and likewise. What is your comment on the institutional framework for carbon project development in Sarawak and Malaysia, and what additional government support would enhance these efforts?
Hello. Yeah, I think that it all boils down to a lot of fury about carbon projects, as you know, in the last couple of years, all centered around integrity and, about the accuracy of all this carbon accounting stuff that we're talking about. So I think that, as you can see, the whole world is tightening a lot of the regulations. And countries are also coming up with new legislation. A lot of this new legislation do incorporate a lot of these issues on transparency in terms of all the integrity issue that we talk about. So I think that, as you can see, you take Malaysia, although Sarawak started in 2022, the whole country is coming up with new regulation in terms of the carbon standard coming in. And also, the MFF is coming in with all sort of regulation, things like that. So all this regulation all tightening up all these concerns that we have. So we have Sarawak side with a lot of new legislation, and we got all these things coming out. And then on top of that, you have the UNFCCC, things like that coming up with CORSIA requirements and VERA requirement. VERA is tightening up all their methodology, and that's also part of the issue that we're facing because as they tightening up a lot of these things, the changes, it come back to us. We have to look at it. We have to make changes. We have to do a lot much more thing. And all these things for the betterment, I think, for the reporting, and also enhance the quality and as well as the integrity of the carbon project. So, what can I say? I think that we all this, is so regulated now in the sense that, and I you can see that, and also the methodology is all improving. Both the verification, validation here, just say about all these things, they're coming up with new methodology and things like that. So I think that this sort of issue will be mitigated somewhat in all these things that we're talking about. Also, like I said, new legislation, Article 6 and things like that. I mean, we have to qualify for it, meet all these requirements. Again, you have to improve a lot of the things that they're talking about.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you highlighted on very important aspects, especially on Article 6, that there is a need for us to benchmark ourselves with what is actually happening internationally. In the same time that we need to also have our domestic emission trading setups, DETS, so we could actually look into the aspirations of Malaysia, which may not be in certain cases as per Article 6. Yeah, we are right on the time, and we have had very engaging discussions here. I think we could have actually talked for another 2 hours on these matters, and that's how prominent this sector is on both the forestry and the palm oil sectors. On sustainability, what should be the drivers? What are the priorities? So one last quick thought from all 4 of you. How should be the future, and what's that one thing that you want to highlight to the engaging audience that we have in front of us? We'll start with Ku.
So I would probably strike a more philosophical tone. So to me, I've always been saying to my internal audience and also to the external audience that when you look at sustainability, it's all about interdependence, interconnection, and inseparability. So the more we realize that a lot of things are not separate, whether it's the people, the planet, or the businesses, the more you realize that you got to do the right things in order to keep all three going and to allow all three to be able to thrive at the same time.
Rashid?
I'll be more practical. So on my side, I mean, the way that I see it, right, There has been a lot of talk and effort and resources being put into frameworks, reporting, disclosures, and that basically takes away resources from actually implementing things on the ground. So as a company, right, I have a limited amount of resources. So every dollar that is spent complying to standards, complying to reporting requirements, complying to disclosures, is one less dollar spent implementing things on the ground. So we need to move away from being heavy at the disclosure, reporting, and framework side, and focus more on impact on the ground.
Thank you very much. Lawrence, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts is all this legislation is just a huge challenge, especially for the forestry industry. I think, we would like the government to look at it holistically and see all these so-called regulation, the EUDR and all these things, they go, whether really, frankly speaking, will we ever have an industry left? Based on what I see, maybe that's the end of the timber industry. The country got to make that decision. You take Sarawak, is still a major contributor to its GDP. You have to make that decision. And I think that today a lot of this regulation and things like that all dictated from the West. Let's be a bit more practical and see what really drives the thing that we have here. You take all these things that you talk about. I know it may be controversial, but who gives the West the right to say that they deserve the standard of living that we do not? Very simple. Why do you think you are allowed to have flush toilets and we are not allowed to have this in Sarawak? Very simple. I just end with that sort of thing.
Thank you very much. Geza?
I can resonate with this, so I will take the policy question a bit further and hopefully give some good news, because the policies, when they arrive, we are never happy with it. It's too late, too early, or it's not exactly the way we were expecting. While we anticipate policymakers to help generate opportunities or enable action on the ground, I think it's clearly the opportunity to do some homework in the meantime, getting the baselines right, understanding the opportunities and preparing those 3 to 5 year plans, made it ready for investors, and waiting for, let's say, the opportunity, either pressure or economic opportunity to come. It's necessary, because at the consumer good manufacturing forums, you hear that consumers would not do this, consumers would not do that, retailers wouldn't. I think this is all made up. We cannot check what consumers say, but we are all consumers, and we all want this to be a better place. So us as a startup who work very closely with policymakers and investors, we know that when the opportunity comes, your plans need to be ready. You need to show that you know what to do on your own plantations, on your third-party supply, and be ready for the policies. So nothing is lost. We can prepare for this, and I think that's the opportunity. That's the good news too, and that's where data can help.
Thank you very much, and let's have a big round of applause for our engaging panelists for your sharing. We were bold, we were practical, we were pragmatic, and thank you very much for being true to your hearts, and thanks also for the audience. Back to you, Melissa.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Supun, for an amazing job moderating that conversation. We'd like to invite all our guests to remain on stage and invite Ms. Eva Oscar, the Deputy Ambassador to the Kingdom of Netherlands to Malaysia, to join them on stage and present them with a token of appreciation. Thank you so much to our amazing panelists for providing us such deep, meaningful insight. All right, one final group photo. Thank you so much to our panelists, Mr. Kukok Ping, Mr. Lawrence Chia, Mr. Rashid Reza Anwaruddin, as well as Dr. Geza Toth of Carbon Space, who is also our partner for this event. All right, thank you so much, Your Excellency, for joining us on stage, for giving out these tokens of appreciation, and thank you so much, Mr. Supon, for the amazing job hosting.